The Council of Jerusalem set a precedent for how the Church would deal with important issues in the future. Even though it was a gathering of human beings using human faculties in making decisions, the letter or decree began with the words, "It is the decision of the Holy Spirit." The deliberations of the council were understood to be guided by the Holy Spirit. Decisions carried the weight of authority. The church leadership took its role in the church seriously. Their role was to maintain unity and clarity when it came to the preaching of the gospel and expanding the church. The actions of the council demonstrated that from the beginning, a centralized authority in deciding important matters for the whole of the church was held in high regard. The decree releasing Gentile converts from certain obligations to the Mosaic law clearly pointed out that faith in Jesus and baptism and following his teachings were all that was necessary to be a true believer. It was a radical concept, to be sure. The Council of Jerusalem is counted as the first in the line of 22 church councils. As at Jerusalem, other councils pondered issues, doctrine, and church discipline, and made decisions for the good of the entire church. Such actions were understood to arise from the action of the Holy Spirit, making them authoritative and binding upon the church as a whole. I chose to review the origins of the papacy and church councils as a starting point for my monastic musings in order to address what I see as some disturbing trends since the election of Pope Francis. A small number of prelates and some respected media outlets have made statements that call into question many things that the Pope has said and appear to be throwing shade, if I may be so colloquial, upon him. For many years, there have been segments of the Catholic population that have stood at odds with the reforms of the Second Vatican Council, and it appears as if this opposition is finding a voice among these prelates and media outlets today. By reviewing the call of St. Peter in Matthew's Gospel and revisiting the first church council at Jerusalem, I am attempting to redirect our focus. The authority of the Pope does not mean that the Holy Father has a red phone on his desk with a direct line to the Almighty. If he did, it would be a yellow phone, papal color, not red. When Jesus handed the keys off to Peter, it was because the Lord knew that the Holy Spirit would ultimately guide the church through Peter, the apostles, and eventually their successors, the bishops. When we recite the Creed at Mass, or the Apostles' Creed when we say the Rosary, we first affirm our belief in God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Almost in the same breath in which we say, "I believe in the Holy Spirit," we continue with, "I believe in the Holy Catholic Church." Yes, the Church is made up of sinful humans like you and me, who make errors in judgment and commit acts that are decidedly unchristian. However, the presence of the Holy Spirit in the Church is why it endures to this day, and why we can say, "I believe," with confidence. The Second Vatican Council was first called by Pope St. John XXIII in 1962, and after Pope John's death, it was reconvened by his successor, Blessed Pope Paul VI in 1963, and came to a close in 1965. Just as at the Council of Jerusalem a decree was issued, so Vatican II promulgated a total of 16 documents, 4 constitutions, 3 declarations, and 9 decrees. It was a massive effort involving all Catholic bishops throughout the world. As with all church councils, the Second Vatican Council is understood to have been guided by the Holy Spirit, and is, therefore, authoritative and binding. Vatican II set out to address the future of the Church in a rapidly changing world. It worked at re-examining what is essential to the Catholic faith by taking an extensive look back to the earliest days of the Church. Perhaps the reforms that touched the Catholic faithful the most were in the liturgy. In the beginning, such changes were positively received. However, in the late 1960s and early 1970s, society unrest, very much in the United States, boiled over into Catholic schools, seminaries, convents, and places of worship. The influence of popular culture at the time mixed in with religious practices, and certain ideas contrary to Vatican II teachings and norms were introduced into some Catholic communities. In reaction to these trends, a new conservatism in politics and religious culture became popular in the 1980s. Evangelical movements throughout the country heavily influenced all Christians, including Catholics, in the United States. There were those of this neo-orthodoxy mentality who hailed the newly elected Pope, now Saint John Paul II, as an icon for this newly minted conservatism. In reality, many of these neo-conservatives ignored, downplayed, or denied a number of things the Pope said when these ideas were in opposition to their political views. This selective deafness extended into the reign of Pope Benedict XVI. It is no secret that a new era for the Church began on March 13, 2013, when Jorge Bergoglio stepped onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica. When the newly elected Pope Francis bowed his head and requested the prayers of all gathered, it was clear that a papacy never seen before was about to begin. Even though much of what he has said echoes his two predecessors, his strong emphasis on reform in the Church has been met by dissident voices, some of these voices coming from some church leaders, politicians, bloggers, and media outlets. It is not my intention to call out these individuals or organizations by name. Rather, I intend to take a positive, non-condemning approach in my vlogs. I plan to base my musings on what the Church really teaches and what are the real norms we are expected to follow. It will be on this basis that I will speak in my future vlogs.